Molnar is a Rails security expert who's exposed critical flaws in major projects. He is the expert companies trust with their most sensitive code, conducting penetration testing for companies worldwide. This is Greg's story. I saw you just bouncing between different cities for conferences in Amsterdam, Romania, and I think Portugal. How does your family handle you disappearing to talk about Rails security around the world?
Well, they handle it somewhat well. It's the kids, actually. My wife can handle it. For her, it's not a massive deal. But this time, I was away for the first time ever for 10 days. This was the longest I was away from the kids. And when I left, they were a bit sad. But then, actually, later on, they handled it well. And then I came home after 10 days for 3 days. And then I went away again for 4 or 5 days. But I think it's like kids. They get used to anything.
And from your side, how do you handle being away from the kids and family?
It's funny. So every time I go away, I have plans, right? First of all, I'm going to sleep well because no distractions, no dogs, no kids, no nothing. And then I always plan I'm going to get some stuff done, right? On the trip, while I'm in the hotel or whatever. Nothing happens. I sleep terribly bad. Well, actually, I can handle that well that I don't really worry about things at home because whatever happens, I can't do anything about it. Hopefully my wife can handle it. If she can't, then it is what it is. And other than that, I handle it well, I think. Of course, I miss the kids after a few days, but that's mostly about it.
When I was preparing for this episode, it wasn't easy to find information about your work online. It's hard to know what kind of work you do, what type of work, and who are your clients. It makes me wonder, do you like to hide such information like that? Are you like a secret agent who works in the dark?
Yes, I think you should always protect your information, right? Because you don't want everybody to know everything about you. Like just to have everything out in the public. Then they can impersonate you, and I think the harder you make anyone to get information about you, the better it is for your privacy. I only share things which are completely public, like easy to find, which I don't mind if anybody knows about me. A lot of people don't even know my nationality, which is I also try to keep that secret. Only people who I actually meet in person knows it usually, or
why so?
In a more private setting. Because I think it's not, for one, it's not important. For two, it's part of privacy. So if somebody wants to impersonate me and they don't even know my nationality, they are going to fail very quickly. Let's say somebody wants to set up a phishing thing and they want to call my wife or something to send money to help me or whatever, and they don't even know that I'm not a native English speaker, then they need to use a different language because that's what I talk with my wife at home. And obviously they fail at the first step, right?
That makes sense. So this is very interesting, but how client can find you? If you are unknown, you like to be vague, hiding all the time. So how someone can find you, can hire you for a job or work with you?
Well, you go to meetups, go to conferences, you meet people in person, and then they know actually who you are. And, or for instance, I think I still have that up somewhere, but I used to have this thing that you can book a call with me free of charge, 30 minutes, whatever issue you have with your security, the chat, I can help if I can. If I can't, I can't, but whatever. And I had a few calls like that, and some of them turned into work. Some like a year later, or even longer, or even 2 years later. So that's how. And then you talk to people, and then they actually get to realize you are a person. Because even if you have a lot of information about you online, I find that if someone just reads it, it's not really a person still. At least that's how I am. I go to a conference, I meet someone, I interacted with the guy online before, but from that on, when I meet him, I actually see the person. Whenever I interact with that person online, it changes everything completely for me. And I think it's kind of the same for other people. Even if you have a video call with someone, it changes things completely. because it's not just like something you see and read. It's you actually interact with a person.
That's why you like to go conferences?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, definitely. It's the best networking thing. It's also fun.
It is fun. I think last conference it was here in Toronto, Ward. I had lots of fun meeting many clients. Founded my hero. I learned from them. So when I had them, totally different. I think I was overwhelmed. It's too much. It's only 3 days, and it's hard to attend every session. But it was fantastic. I missed a few people that I had planned to see them. It wasn't enough time. I think it should be 5 days.
Yeah, but then you would. Well, I'm already very tired at the end of the session day. I think doing it for 5 days would be too much. But Railsworld is a massive conference. It's like 1,000 people. It's really big. So you have to accept that you go there and you are not going to meet everyone. I went to all Railsworlds so far. And for instance, in Amsterdam, I met Ollie the second day. I'm like, hey, you are here? I'm like, how come we didn't bump into each other? Then I met a few people who did a triathlon with me. I met many of them in Bucharest because that's a much smaller conference. It's 110 people or something. So you kind of meet everybody. And I met a lot of guys there who were in Amsterdam. Like, how come we didn't cross path? But that's how big 1,000 people is. You don't cross path with everybody. You have to accept that kind of. You are like, yeah, this time I'm able to meet this many people. Next time I will try to socialize with other people.
I want to understand your evolution. So you started with PHP, correct? Long time ago. And then you moved on Rails. Somehow you ended up with one of the hardest security certifications in the world, the OSCP. Okay, let's unpack your journey here. Take me to your PHP days. What was the moment that you say, okay, I'm done with this?
So yeah, my PHP days, I was working for an agency. We were building websites for the hotel industry mostly. And then I learned a lot about PHP, I think, and I was like a senior developer already. I think I knew pretty much the ins and outs of the language. And that's when I was like, okay, actually PHP is really good for certain things, but it has a bunch of limitations, and maybe it would be good to learn something else. I was still young. I want to learn something else. And I was looking into other languages and frameworks, and I found Python and Django and Ruby and Rails. And I was like, okay, I need to decide which one should I learn. Then I watched the famous Build a Blog in 15 Minutes video. And I was like, holy moly, this is what I need to learn. I love this. And then I started to learn Rails slowly. I also found a PHP framework, which was very similar to Rails, actually. But it's still, because the language limitations, it was nowhere near as good. But the actual concepts were trying to mimic Rails. It was actually also interesting. It's from a Japanese guy, because Ruby is from Mats, from Japan. This framework was also done by a Japanese guy. So maybe they think in a similar way over there. I don't know. And then I picked up Rails, transitioned to become a Rails developer. And then I started contracting, and I got a contract at a security consultancy. So they were doing all sort of security work, and they had internal apps to run the company, and those were written in Rails. So they hired me to work on those internal apps. Then the contract turned to be an actual employment. And then I was surrounded with these people where we had like meetings every week where they briefed about the things they are working on and things they are experimenting with. They kind of infected me with this curiosity about security. And I even asked my manager, okay, what if I would want to sort of transition or learn more about security? And she gave me a few tips. And then those guys recommended this certification for me. I said, if I want to learn security, I should go through this certificate and the learning material, because this will give me a really good base. And and then so I started to work on that OSCP. I left that company, and then I did the certification. Then I still did mostly Rails development for a while. And when I left my last full-time job, as an employee, that's when I started to transition or split my time between doing security work and development. And that's what I do for the past 5 years or so.
Between security and development, combine both?
Yeah, not really combined, it's usually separate. So I do Rails development as well as a contract sometimes. Sometimes work finds me. I also do penetration testing or security consulting, but mostly penetration testing. But it's totally separate. So I never really do any security related development, to be honest. I don't even think that's that would be a requirement from anybody. Like they more likely want a consulting. So we want to develop this feature. We have these security requirements. Can you give us some help how we should approach it? And then their development team is going to build it.
You mentioned something in penetration. What is that? Penetration testing, right?
Penetration testing, yes.
What is that? Explain to me. Separate more on that.
Sure. So penetration testing is when a company hires you to test the security of their application or their network or anything. And then it has a few variants, there is one which they call red teaming exercise these days, which is like, oh, this is what an actual malicious group would try to do. So they don't get any information. They do their own research about the company, and then they try to hack the company with a permit. So they don't actually cause any damage, but they find all the vulnerabilities, and then they write a report and deliver it to the company so they can fix it before the bad guys found the issues. And then there is the actual penetration testing, which I do, which also has some variants where it can be either black box, which is now red teaming is kind of replacing that, where you don't really know anything about the project, but you get a URL and then you try to attack it and find ways to hack it. Or there is gray box, where you get information, you can ask questions from their team. What are the technologies you are using? What are the sensitive parts? What do you think I should look into more deeply? And then you go through the application and find ways to break into it or to find vulnerabilities. Then you write a report and you hand it over. And there's a third version where you also get access to the source code, so you can audit the code as well, which makes things usually go faster. But that's not really a requirement to find vulnerabilities.
What do you mean when you say it get more a bit faster?
Well, if you have access to the source code, let's say even if I have access to the source code, I do the test on the application manually. Sometimes I go through the code just to check a few obvious things. I check if they store any secrets in the code base, etc. So there are some checks which I do on the code base. But I don't check the code for vulnerabilities, like traditional vulnerabilities, like, oh, there is a server-side request forgery or access or whatever. I still go through the application. And let's say I find something where it looks like there is a vulnerability, but I always get a 500 error. So I can't figure out if it's my payload or if it's not a vulnerability or what's wrong. It's so much easier if I can look at the source code and see what actually happens in the code when I trigger that request to verify that, oh, it's an error, I can't exploit it. That's why I always get the 500, or, oh, I just need to tweak my payload, and then it's actually a vulnerability. So that's why it saves time. If I don't have that, then usually I try to tweak my payload, and if I still can't figure out what's going on, then I talk to the team. So it's more time consuming.
How long what it takes you to find vulnerability or find issue usually? What is the difference between based on application?
It very depends on the application. If they have a penetration test before, that's a very big factor. Because some companies have it yearly, and let's say they had one every year for the past 5 years, and they don't really push too much new features. So you are not going to find that many problems. But if it's a first ever penetration test, you will find issues the first hour, probably. And not really the first hour, because the way everybody does it differently. I think that the way I do penetration testing is I spend the first few hours, or sometimes it depends on the size of the application, first day just exploring, just going through the application, see the certain features, functionality, how things are working, and then I go through the usual checks to authentication, authorization, and also I already have an idea which I do like an ideation of, okay, what kind of vulnerabilities might they have because they have certain features. For instance, let's say they do external requests, they are fetching something from third parties and you can control the URL. And I'm like, okay, very likely they have a server-side request forgery. So I need to make sure I test that. And if they do some video manipulation or image manipulation, then I know I need to look into vulnerabilities around that. So sometimes I don't even look into vulnerabilities on the first day. But if it's a very first penetration test, the first day of the actual testing, you find issues the first hour.
First hour, really?
Yeah. Well, you already know from it's called reconnaissance. You already know from the reconnaissance where to look for things. And I usually look for the obvious things first, and then I start to fill out the report, and then I go for the more non-obvious ones, more difficult ones. Because I think security should be pragmatic. And I always try to get the most bang for the buck for the customer. So I want to find all these silly low-hanging fruits quickly, because then if I just look into the more difficult ones, then they are not getting the best value out of the test, because the easy ones are the ones that will be found by someone malicious and will be exploited by someone malicious. It's not the super difficult ones. It's usually the low-hanging fruits that are the most important ones to cover. So first I go through those and then go through the more difficult ones, more advanced issues, and then if time permits, then I go through all of those as well, and then everybody's happy. We find all the issues, which doesn't happen. You don't find all the issues usually.
In Rails application, it's not easy to find all the issues, security issues. It takes time to find.
In any applications, we are humans. You always miss something, unfortunately. You try to cover everything, but I'm pretty sure we always miss something.
And usually it happens mostly from expert or senior developers. Sometimes they forget about it, or mostly senior.
I don't really look into who committed the code that's vulnerable, because I think that's not a good idea to do, because you shouldn't really blame anyone, because we all make mistakes. It can be anyone. Even I might write vulnerable code because I just don't realize that I'm making something silly. It's humans make mistakes. That's the thing. That's what you need to be content with.
I want to talk about the OSCP challenge, because this is really fascinating me. What I read about it, someone told me, I think it's almost like the Navy SEALs test for security. That's what it was described. It's about 48 hours and it's an exam where you actually hack into systems. So it's not just pretending or faking, it's actual system you hack into. No multiple choice, no theory, it's just a pure practical hacking. What kind of person vulnerability signs up for 48 hours for that torture?
Yeah, exactly. That's how the exam was. I don't know how it is now, because I took it in 2017 or something, I think. So I think they changed it recently, but probably it's the actual concept is the same. You have 48 hours, 5 machines, and you get points for the machines, and you need to. So it depends how far you get on the targets, how many points you get. But if you get full access, then I think you need to hack at least 4 machines with full access to pass the exam. And yeah, sorry, what was the question at the end?
You mentioned, sorry, you said 4 machine, 4 access. What do you mean 4 access?
Full access means you have root access on the server.
Oh, full
because
access,
it's also,
okay.
Yeah, full access, because you can find vulnerabilities in a web application, but you still can't get onto the server. Or you find something where you can get on the server, but with a low privileged user. Usually web applications are run by a low privileged user. But if you want to do a complete test, then you also verify, okay, I'm a low privilege user. Can I escalate my privileges to a higher level of user so I get complete root access on the server and I have access to everything? And that's the full compromise. And that's where you get the most points on that exam.
And you said it's not depends on time, it depends on how far you can go.
Exactly. Time doesn't matter. You have 48 hours. When I finished my exam, I got the report done with I think 8, 7, 9 hours before the end. But I still didn't submit it because we were like, okay, I still want to double check. I still want to make sure everything is included as it needed. So I just waited. I had a sleep. I went to sleep, woke up the next morning. Then I verified that, okay, everything is good in order. And that's when I sent it.
Do you have a plan for it yourself, or they give you a plan?
No, it's up to you. No plan at all. And I don't, you can hack for 48 hours, but I don't think that's healthy. You have 48 hours to do it, and everybody comes up with their own plan, the best thing that works for them. I think what I did is I started my exam at 10 or 11. And the reason for that was that so on the last day, I still can wake up early and have a few hours before I reach the deadline. I started at 11, went through the evening, get a good night of sleep, woke up the next morning, go through the whole day. And then the next morning you wake up and you deliver the report, hopefully.
Did you pass it on the first time?
No. I failed. The first time I failed. I passed on the second attempt, I think.
How was it? How all about that?
Fine, because the reason you failed the first time, actually now I think it's much better. Back then, you ask them how is the exam is going to be, and they say that they don't give you any information, so you don't know what you are facing with. and then you suddenly end up in the exam environment, and it's like completely foreign. You don't even know what you need to prepare to, and I think that's why a lot of people fail at the first time. Second time it's much easier because you already know, okay, this is how everything is going to be laid out. This is how things are working, and all I need to focus is just to find the issues, and also probably you have more nerves the first time. I don't know. Probably that's a factor as well.
Makes sense. Yeah. First time you're getting into something, pick out, you're panicking, you're not ready, but second time, okay, I've done it before, so I understand what it takes.
Exactly.
In that 48 hours, what did you learn about yourself?
Good question. It was a long time ago, to be honest. I don't even remember where I lived when I did the actual exam. But probably I think from like the whole experience, not just the exam, what I learned is that you can do anything if you want. You just need to be patient and you need to try harder. That's their motto. Whenever you ask for help, they just tell you, oh, try harder. And I think also maybe this is something I learned from during the exam. I think the second time I took more breaks, and that really helps. So when you feel a little bit tired or like stuck, it's better to just take a break, go for a walk, get some fresh air, go brew a tea or something, and that usually helps with problem solving. It kind of resets your brain and you get a better start again at the problem.
Have you trained yourself into this exam? I know it was hard, as you mentioned, and first time you failed, and you said the first day was not easy, and you have to take breaks. But how mentally you train yourself before you get?
Well, they have a training platform. So before you do the exam, you have access to a lab environment where I don't remember. It's maybe like 50 machines which you can hack, and it's kind of the same. If you do the exam, it's kind of a similar thing, but in some sense it's separated. It's different, not separate, but in some sense it's different. But you are already getting experience hacking machines and moving between networks, That's actually another thing you expect during the exam, but you don't have to do that. It's a single network. During the practice, you need to move between networks, pivot between them. So that was the preparation. I think it took like 6 months to. I think I took 6 months at least.
6 months preparing for the exams.
Yeah, to learn all the materials, to go through the practice labs, and then to say, yeah, now I think I'm. Maybe even need to get some. I don't remember how the exam eligibility works.
This was a long time ago. 2017, you said.
Yeah, it was like 8 years ago now. Actually, it's a long time. But no, I don't think you need need to hack any machines in the lab. I think all you need to do is just sign up for the course. You get the material. If you want, you can do the exam probably the next day, but you're gonna fail for sure.
It's interesting. Hopefully, this will be an inspiration for other folks who want to get into security to be prepared 6 months ahead.
Yeah, the exam, it depends. It also depends what is your background. Because for me, my background was like development. I didn't know much about networking. I didn't know much about like reading C code and reading various programming languages or just modifying exploits in a language which I'm not really familiar with. If you have all those experiences beforehand, maybe you only need a month or two. Everybody is in a different situation, to be honest.
We have 24 commits on GitHub for Rails. What was your first contribution, and were you accepted? Was that contribution accepted right away, or did they just destroy you in your comment?
I don't remember if my first ever contribution was accepted into Rails, because it was the first one accepted was 2013, so 12 years ago. I don't remember if I did any before, and it is the contribution with most people start with. I think it was a documentation thing. I just fixed something in the docs.
How you felt about the first PR when it got merged?
No idea. It was so long ago. Probably I was happy, or maybe I was indifferent. I don't remember, to be honest.
Was this your first contribution open source?
Probably not. No, but definitely not. No. I did open source even in PHP. I contributed to that framework I used and made some PHP stuff, open source extensions for that framework. And then probably even with Ruby and Rails was not my first, I would think.
You contributed to Ruby before Rails?
No, not to Ruby. I never contributed to Ruby, but contributed to maybe some gems before Rails. I have no idea, to be honest. It was so long ago. It's easy to find my first Rails commit, but finding the first ever Ruby contribution, I don't know. I need to look into how to find it on GitHub. I contributed to quite a few gems now, like Rec Mini Profiler, Ransack, Textacular, just to name a few. Mongoid, there was a period when I was doing MongoDB stuff. And what else? I don't know, a bunch of things. Every time if I found a bug, I just fixed it and created a pull request for it.
When you work on contribution, what that teach you about yourself?
It's a good question. It certainly teaches you that your code is not you, which is, I think a lot of people get offended when their contribution is not accepted, which never happened to me. I'm like, yeah, if they accept it, it's fine. Also, there are two kinds of contribution. One is when you fix a bug, which is kind of obvious they will accept it. They might ask you to fix it differently, or they might say, actually, your fix is not how we think it should be fixed, but that's unlikely. Or that is when you contribute something which is a change. And for the later, it's very, there's a high chance that they will just say, sorry, we don't want this. And you should just accept that. That's perfectly fine, because it's not your project, and maybe they don't want your contribution for whatever reason. And so that's one thing which I think is a good lesson from doing open source. your code is not you. It's not against you when somebody doesn't accept your change. It's just because they just don't want it. And you should try it again, contribute something else, fix bugs. Bug fixes are always welcome, I think, in any open source project.
When you get rejected first time, or anytime you get rejected by the maintainers, does this set you back? Is it any more project? I have hard feeling.
Not really. No. It likes many. I had one big Rails pull request, which was changes were requested. I did all the changes. I think it was actually a really good learning experience. Then we got to a good solution. And then because the feature was coming to be deprecated in the next release by that time, it was just, why would they even merge it? It's going to be removed anyways. So it was just closed. And I put quite a bit of time into that, but it is what it is. I learned from it. That's the point. And usually, not usually, but sometimes you open a pull request and they ask for changes and it's a back and forth. So it's not like, yeah, here it is and they merge it. Sometimes you need to go through some tweaks, and that's just part of the game. It's not to discourage anybody. It's just part of open source contributions.
You should not give up.
Definitely. But I think with open source, the way you should look at it, the way I look at open source, my open source contributions are usually coming from problems I have myself. So I find a bug, I find a documentation error, mistake, I read the docs and I see something is not documented or could be worded better or it's a typo or whatever, and I fix that. I don't really do open source contributions just for the sake of doing open source. I did that in the past, but that was also because the company I worked for used a gem, and then I contributed to the gem because we wanted to make it better for everybody and for our own use case. But yeah, that's how I look at open source. It's not like there are people who work on open source because they like to work on those projects, and some people don't even use the tools they work on sometimes. Yeah, and they just like to work on certain set of problems, and that's fine. But if it's not your own project, then usually it's hard to contribute to things which you don't really use, to be honest. Like for instance, now we have this Hacktoberfest, which is run by DigitalOcean to increase open source contributions, and it's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time.
Can you tell me what is this exactly?
So it's a kind of a program to increase open source contributions. They started it a long time ago, and what they did in the first few years, they gave away prizes. So you got 5 pull request merged, and you got a T-shirt. I have some of those T-shirts, and then they stopped giving out prizes because it became a spam became a problem. So a lot of people started to open spam. They just created a repository, they faked it, then they started to create spam pull requests. So maintainers were flooded with low quality changes. And then I think now they have a better system. Now they only count if the repository owner is explicitly enrolls into the program. But I think it's good to get people into open source, but open source shouldn't be like, I go to GitHub and I see what I can do on XYZ repository. I think the best way to get into it is like, hey, I'm really excited about this problem. Like there is this reaction view and Herb from Marco wrote, which is a completely new way of thinking about the whole Rails front end. And he's really passionate about this. He's really interested about these things. So that's why he's trying to build tools to make it better. So that's passion. That's why he does open source. I think that's one side, but then usually you need to come up with your own project. It's not like I'm passionate about something and I'm going to find someone else's project and he will welcome me to contribute. That might happen, but I think that's a lower probability. And the other one, which I recommend to everybody, when you do your work, you find a bug, you find something which could be better, which could be improved, then you go and, oh, actually, I could make this gem better for everybody, not just for myself. And that's how you get your contribution.
When you do write code and you fix it, you catch yourself, oh man, I could totally exploit this.
When I write code, well, no, not really, because then I don't write it that way. But when I write code, I try to think about all the edge cases, how someone could break it. But still, I might overlook something. It happens, unfortunately.
Tell me more about that.
I can't give you a concrete example, but the thing is, when you write code, usually you look at it from a different perspective than when you are doing a security audit. Because usually programming is about, here is this problem, I need a solution. And okay, the solution is to get this end result, and I want the code to be easy to read, easy to follow, easy to change in the future. I also want it to be performant. But usually security is the last thing, and a lot of people don't even think about security at all. And that's why vulnerabilities happen, because you think about all the important things from a developer perspective, and security is an afterthought. And if you are unlucky, you make a mistake somewhere, or you just don't think about an edge case, and then you introduce a vulnerability.
Based on vulnerability, you found CVES in Phlex, Console 1984, which is written by Basecamp, and DocuSeal. These are not happy projects, Greg. Real projects. Walk me through your process. Do you wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to break something today, or it's more accidental?
Some of it is accidental. With the DocuSeal, I think that was a 2FA bypass. So I found that issue in something I tested, I think. I was like, oh, this might be widespread. So then I went to GitHub and I tried to search for that pattern. I found, I don't know, like 10, 15 applications with that issue, and I reported it to all of them. I think that's what I reported to DocuSeal, if I remember correctly. Console 1984, that was really interesting. Basecamp, or I think it was called Basecamp back then, but 37 Signals were talking about that project even before it was released, and I was like, I'm 100% sure I can bypass this, because I can't imagine a way to do this so that I cannot bypass it. So I was actually really waiting for the day they released the gem. And it was just because I like a challenge sometimes. So I took it as a challenge on myself to figure out a way to bypass all their protections. And they released it, I found a few issues. Actually, I think I didn't handle that correctly initially, because I found some issues. I wrote a blog post and then I reported it to them, and I think it should have been the other way around. I should have reported it first and then write a blog post. But Jorge really handled that well. He just said, hey, next time maybe just contact me first. And he was absolutely right. So from then on, we had this back and forth. He improved it. I reviewed it again. I found a few more issues. He fixed all of those issues again. So the back and forth, and in the end, I think the gem became pretty solid. And now it's very hard to bypass, maybe even impossible. But still, you should use a write-only database with that gem for your audit logs. That's the most secure way to make sure nobody can play with them. Nobody can override them or delete them. And so that those are two different things. And the third way I sometimes find vulnerabilities is just things I use, and I just realize, oh, are they doing something here in an insecure way? And then I poke at it, and then sometimes it turns out to be a vulnerability. The Phlex one, I don't know. I think the Phlex one, that's a very typical error with XSS. And probably that's why I was like, okay, let's see how they handle link tags. And I just looked at it and I saw that actually somebody already found the issue, and there was a mitigation to prevent JavaScript as a protocol. But the problem was it was a case sensitive issue, so you can still bypass it. Just check if the protocol is JavaScript lowercase, If you change the casing, or if you just do some encoding tricks, then you can still bypass it.
And that's like you work on the project itself, and then you found out that, like, what made you look there?
I don't really remember, but probably I just because Joel was tweeting about Phlex, and I had this idea. Okay, Phlex renders links, right? So how do they render it? Let's have a look and see if it has any vulnerabilities.
And was it easy to find in the first place, or it took you time?
I think that one was pretty easy to find.
Would you say most of Rails applications have this kind of vulnerability?
More than ideal, to be honest. So that whole vulnerability is down to an interesting HTTP or HTML specification. So an HTML link tag, an H tag, has the href attribute, and that attribute specifies a schema and the URL. For instance, if the schema is HTTP or HTTPS, then there is a URL. But that schema can be file. For instance, you can open a file in your browser from your local drive, or it can be JavaScript. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, that it can be JavaScript. And if you set it to JavaScript, whenever someone clicks on that link, the JavaScript is executed in the browser. And a lot of people overlook this. And for instance, Rails, if you use link to, because they follow the HTML specification, they permit JavaScript because it's a valid, according to the specification, it's a valid protocol. So they just allow any protocols by default, unless you sanitize, which removes that. So I find that in more Rails apps than I think I should have.
What should we do, like in Rails developers? Like you talk about, this is most Rails application. For me as a Rails developer, what should I do?
I think one thing which you can do to find or prevent all these sort of silly issues is to use a static code analyzer like Breakman, because Breakman should flag all of this. Yes, just set up Breakman on your code base and make sure it runs on every pull request, on every change. So I really appreciate the guy who originally wrote Breakman. His name, I don't know his actual name, but his handle is President Beef. He made so many cool things in this security space with Ruby. And he tried to create a Breakman Pro version to fund the development of Breakman, I think, but it didn't work out for him. And I don't know, probably he got an offer from Synopsys, I think, who bought it, and then he sold the project for them, which is, he worked on this for years. So obviously you have to feed your kids, right? So he had an opportunity to finally make some money from this brilliant tool, because he couldn't make any money, unfortunately, in any other way, and they just changed the license. So I wasn't really angry, and the license change is still not terrible, because you can still use Breakman on your own code. That's perfectly fine. But when I do a code audit and I sell a service for money and I use Breakman as an added value, then I would need to buy a license for Breakman. And this is where I was like, okay, nobody would know if I use Breakman actually, but I still want to be a good citizen and don't break the license. So like, here is an opportunity to learn static code analysis and create an alternative and maybe make it even better. I had a few ideas to make it better, which I haven't done yet, but I still, now actually I want to get back to that project and do some changes which will make it better than Breakman at the moment is. And then we can have a healthy competition with Breakman and see whose tool is going to be the best, which is great for everybody. And that's how it came. The whole project came to my mind, and then it wasn't a weekend project. I didn't know anything about static code analyzing, so I started to research how this whole AST thing works, how you can parse Ruby code and then work through the source code tree, and yeah, it was quite a learning experience.
What was the hardest part of the replicate from Breakman?
I didn't really replicate anything from Breakman, to be honest. I thought I want to do this like a fresh start, so it's going to be completely different for multiple reasons. I don't want to break the license and just they could just say, oh, you just copied the project. That's one thing. The other thing is, why would I just make something which is exactly the same? So I started from scratch, and I think the most difficult part was just to get the hang of this whole parsing of Ruby code and walking through the syntax tree, and then also how you changes, or not changes, but where values are coming from. Because the whole idea is that you track through the code that what is a user controlled value, and if it's passed to an API where a user controlled value might lead to a vulnerability, you flag that up during the scan.
Who was the first user beside yourself?
So when I made the jam, I was the first user, obviously, and then I created also an online platform where you could connect your GitHub repository and then run these scans on your repository. The first one, I don't remember who was the first one. I had Avo, I had Adrian from Avo, I had also Bullet Train use it as well. I had a few users, but I don't remember who was the first. And I shut down that project since then because it wasn't really getting the attention I hoped it would get, and I didn't put in the time, and I was like, yeah, let's shut it down. Which might have been a mistake, who knows? Maybe I should have had it running
When did you shut it down?
3 years ago, I think.
You got any requests from any developers? What happened? Why did you do?
Not really. It didn't have that many users. And it wasn't well. Actually, yeah, maybe that's the problem. Maybe today I would be able to make it more popular, probably. But also, I think that it's a very competitive market these days, and yeah, I don't think that project has too many legs, to be honest, to make it a financially viable. And also, if because the application had to get access to the source code, there's always these concerns. Oh, you have even though it's just temporarily until the scan is running. A lot of companies don't really want to give access to their source code. So yeah, I think it's not an easy sell. And you can just run Breakman on your own CI and get pretty much the same result. But with this one, what I did is it was just much easier because you had a UI. So the other thing with static code analysis, there are false positives. You can't do anything about it. You will find false positives where the scanner thinks something is an issue, but in reality, it isn't an issue. And to handle those, you mark those on your CI as a false positive. And with Breakman, you need to do it in a config file. What I built is there was a UI, and you could just click a button or a link that, yeah, ignore this. And then it was ignored on the next run. So your CI didn't fail.
I want to switch gears to your island. So you live on an island. That's what you told me last time when we met in Rails conference here in Toronto last year. It's fascinating. So you're doing cutting edge Rails security work from an island in Portugal, correct?
Yes.
And you are building houses, raising animals, living a farmstead life now. How does chopping wood in the morning influence you to think about digital security in the afternoon?
I don't chop food because this is a tropical island, so we don't need to chop food. It's always warm all year round.
Because life in islands is more relaxing, chill, and laid back. How can there's influence between that and daily security?
Probably that's why I actually like it, because I get both. So when I want chill and calmness, it's like that's my day-to-day life, but then I can get online and get all the craziness of the internet, and I got both stimuli, but I still have the choice. If I don't want to go online, then I can just be on my chill world, which is the island.
Do you think that this thing gives you respect of others that miss?
Maybe because I spend a lot of time outside, and that's also something which I even when I do a penetration test these days, what I told you during the exam, breaks help a lot. So even when I do a penetration test and I find something and I can't really exploit it, I'm not sure what am I doing wrong, and maybe I'm just in a wrong, going down the wrong rabbit hole. I take a break, I go out to feed the animals, and I walk around, get some fresh air, and that helps to solve the problem. And you get back, you get a kind of reset, and then because I think spending time outdoors is just amazing, and a lot of people don't do that or do it less and less, which is don't sit in front of a computer all day long. It's not healthy, I think, and it just gets you very narrow-minded because you think that's the reality, and that's not the reality.
What is the hardest, Greg? Debugging code or fixing chicken coop?
Fixing chicken coop is not that difficult, but yeah, there are hard things in everything, to be honest. The hard thing on the land is the unexpectedness. So there is sometimes shit hits the fan unexpectedly. Like we have a pony and we have an electric fence. That's how she eats the grass. Like the other morning, I woke up and I'm like, what the hell is getting onto our terrace? The horse got out because the battery went down. I knew the battery is low, but I'm a procrastinator, so I didn't change the battery. And then the horse got out and just walked on the terrace. So it's early morning. I'm still half asleep and I need to get dressed, quickly get out, catch the horse, put it back to the fence. Otherwise, it breaks trees and who knows what else. It steps on vegetables. So that's the thing. It's always something unexpected. Always happens at the worst times as well. Sometimes, like when there is a storm, then something happens with the animals or something. So we need to resolve it in a shitty weather.
When you speak to your kids about explaining your job, like what do you say? Hey kids, I illegally break into computer. Is that what you said to them?
Legally.
Legally, I'm legally breaking into computers.
I don't think my kids are still young. The eldest is 9 years old. She doesn't understand what I'm doing. She understands the programming one a little bit, but the breaking one, the security stuff, she doesn't understand it at all. She's too young for that.
Island makes you more paranoid about digital security?
Like digital security? Not really. It doesn't really make a difference, I would say. And as for like actual security and safety, is just I think it's much better because I think there are studies about this. You have more crime in bigger cities because people don't know each other, so there is no shame factor. Whereas in a village, everybody knows everybody, so it's less likely that somebody is going to commit a crime because if they get caught, then there's the shame factor. So like the whole village will know, yeah, that guy is a criminal. Whereas in a city, you you get arrested for anything, you go out the next day, you walk the city, nobody's going to recognize you, nobody's gonna point a finger. So I think that's why in cities there is more crime usually, and on this island pretty much everybody knows everybody, so the crime rate is really low. But I see a lot of loopholes here like everywhere, because you also it's more I think the smaller a community is, the more the trust-based system works well. The bigger it is, the less trust-based system works, and you need more security. But here we still have like they deliver bread and bakery stuff to people, and they just hang it on the doorknob. Nobody's going to steal it because it's normal here. go do that in a big city. Probably it's going to be, you turn around and it's going to be gone.
Is there any parallel between secure code and building physical houses?
Not really, to be honest. I think it's completely different, and that's why I like it. And it's, I think it's very satisfying to know that actually, if I would really have to, I could build shelter for myself. Because hopefully we never get into that situation, but you never know. And it's now I passed the test. I know if I would need to build a house from wood, I would probably be able to do that. It would be difficult without all the tools I have, but still.
Spektr Scanner is your company, correct?
Spekter Security is the company, yeah. Spekter used to be a product as well, which it doesn't exist anymore.
That was called Spektr Scanner?
Yes, exactly.
So Spektr Security is your consultants. When a company reaches out to you, say, hey, Greg, please help.
That I think never happened. Usually they reach out for a penetration test and then they ask, okay, Greg, we need help. We need to get a penetration test done. Are you able to do one? And then the whole process is that we usually go through a questionnaire, which is a scoping questionnaire. So I learn about the application and their needs. Is it just the web application, or is it a network as well? Or do they have mobile apps they want to test? So there are a bunch of questions: what technology stack they use, how big is the application, etc. Did they have a previous penetration test? Do they have a bug bounty program? A bunch of questions which they answer, and that helps me also what the outcome they want from the penetration test. And then based on that, I can give them a quote and tell them this is how long it will take, and this is how much it will cost, and then hopefully they approve. We get a date, we get the test done, they get the report, everybody's happy.
That's really simple and easy. If a company in New York or Toronto on Silicon Valley, how could they reach out to you?
Find my email address. My email address is on my blog, so they can reach out easily. And I don't want to convince anybody to work with me. Hopefully they saw some of my work somewhere, and that's why they reach out.
So for those who didn't see how you convince them that the right person for the job,
I can show them something I did in the past. But to be honest, I feel like I'm super lucky because it's usually not usually, it's all the time, it's inbound. So I never really reach out to a company, hey, can I do a penetration test for you because I am qualified, look, this and that proves that I'm the right person for the job. Usually people reach out to me, or not usually, all the time, people reach out to me because they saw me somewhere somehow, or somebody recommended me, and then that part is already solved. I don't need to sell myself. It's more like, okay, can we do it in the time frame they need it to be? Is the price within their budget? And when we have a call, do they think that I'm the person they think I am based on the work or the recommendation they got from?
Talk about Spekter, the commercial license. So you charge for the commercial, right?
Yeah, but nobody bought one, so.
And you keep it free.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
But that's also, it's not really a charge for a commercial license. I would charge if somebody would want to use it in their scanner, which they charge money for. So for instance, there is a company called Code Climate. And what they do is they run certain analysis on your code, and one is that they can do a security analysis on your code base. So if Code Climate would want to use my scanner and they are making money because they are using it, I would want them to buy a license, not just use it for free. But if you use it on your own code, perfectly fine. If you use it on somebody else's code as a penetration tester or security person, that's perfectly fine. You don't need a license for that. That's all free. because you are not directly making money from the tool. This is why I think the Breakman license could be better. They should allow you to use it in an added service, not in a product. Because if it's a service, even though you use a tool, you still need to do a lot of work. Just the tool doesn't really, that's like maybe 5% of the value. Whereas if it's a product, it can be 80% of the value.
80%.
If it's a product, yes. The whole thing on Code Climate is the value is the actual scanner. They just run the scan for you. It's not like a human also does some work on the result and explains it to you. And based on the result, they are finding even more issues. Because, for instance, if you do a penetration test and you run a static code analyzer, it's not going to find all the issues. It's going to find a lot of false positives, which might lead you to other issues. So it gives you ideas and also shows you patterns the developers use, but you still do your actual work. So let's say I do a penetration test for 5 days and then I run Spekter on the first day. I have the source code, I run it on the first day. It saves me maybe 2-3 hours, but I still do the rest of the 5 days of work, and that's the 90% of the value of this service I sell. So why would I buy a license? Or why would I ask someone to buy a license for Spekter for such a thing, where the added value is not massive to the end product?
Let's say CEO talk to you, call you, hey, Greg, we have security issues. What's on their mind? Fear, harassment, freaking out, joy to meet?
I don't think I ever had anybody who reached out and said, oh, we have security issues. It's not like that. It's either two things. One is, hey, Greg, we are doing this certification and for compliance, and we need the penetration test. That's one of the requirements, like ISO 27001 or SOC 2. And then we need a penetration test. Can you help us with that? Or the other scenario is when they are like, oh yeah, now we are in a state where we kind of worry about security issues and we want to make sure that we don't have any. So we want to get a penetration test done. Can you help us with that? Those are usually the two, or not usually, those are the two scenarios I faced with.
What is the most common bullshit reaction from the CEO or the company when you deliver the report and there's something bad news?
Well, the way I do the test, if I find something which is a really serious vulnerability, I don't wait till the end of the test. I tell them immediately so they can fix it quickly. I don't want them to wait 4 or 5 days and then learn about it. But usually I always tell them, be chill, don't rush. If you have a vulnerability, it's there for a while anyways. So it doesn't matter if you are stressed or something, it's not going to change anything. So you should be chill and just fix it. And for the reports, freak out, I never really had anyone who freaked out. It's more like, sometimes it's a bit eye-opening, especially first penetration test. You find so many issues, they're like, wow, this is how many things we didn't know about. But everybody so far took it well, to be honest. It's also a learning experience. You realize, oh, we need to get better at certain things. And I do tests for the same companies year after year, and they are doing an amazing job at improving. So I still find issues sometimes with the new things they push. And now there is a really good thing for me is this whole AI and LLM things are introducing a completely new attack vector. So every company who integrates AI, even though I tested their apps before, now there are new kind of things I can look into, which I didn't before. And now I find issues again in apps where I didn't really find because we already did 2 tests in the past 3 years.
AI is a blessing for you.
Yes, because it's a completely new technology. So let's say I I did a penetration test for a company 3 years ago. I found SQL injections and XSS. They learned about that from the report, and next time when they write code, they know, okay, we did this mistake in the past, we're not going to do it again, right? So they also, it's not just they fixed the issues which I found, they also learned to avoid the same issue in the future. And then they implemented some different features with integrations, whatever, where they didn't know how to avoid security issues. So I found some of those issues in the next test. But after a while, it's like, yeah, third year, if they just do the same things and if they learn from the experience, they are not really introducing any more vulnerabilities, right? Because they are getting better. But now, because there is a new thing, AI, now they implement AI-backed features. Now they are back again at a state where they don't know the security complications or security concerns of these features, and it gives them more work.
So you are one of the few who loves AI.
I don't love AI the same way as people like it. I don't use AI. I don't use AI assisted coding at all. I tried it a few times. To me, the results are terrible. I don't like it. I don't use it for, some people use it for security. I don't use it for that either. I tried it, didn't give me good results. So it was a waste of time, to be honest. But what I like about AI, I like to hack AI. Because it's very different from traditional hacking. It's more like social engineering.
What do you mean by that?
So for me, traditional hacking is when you actually find a vulnerability in the code, and then you create a payload and you find a way to make the code behave in a different way than it's supposed to. Whereas with AI, it's more like when you talk to a human and you try to convince that human to do something for you which they shouldn't. That's like social engineering. Like, can you give me your password, please? Of course, this is not what you would ask from a human, but you could try to trick a human into giving their password to you by setting up a scenario like, I'm calling from IT and we need to access your whatever. And the same thing with AI, you can try to make it do things which it shouldn't, leak information, and even more serious things. As if they are connected to tools and if they have access to actual databases, then that's probably that's a very big attack surface, I would say.
Would you agree that you mainly work with financial companies?
No, not really.
Have you worked with them before?
Yes, I have. But like the security work is not just financial companies; it's pretty much any software as a service company these days are. It's really good. It's improving. Even the smaller companies are worried about security now, and they invest in getting at least a penetration test done, so they get the basics fixed. They learn from it, and then they improve their security posture.
Where would startup fit?
Startups, they don't care about security at all, unless they really have to. Unfortunately, it's more of when a company matures. So they are a few years old, they are making good revenue, and then they have a more mature leadership. That's when usually the CTO thinks about, oh, what about security? Maybe we should invest some time and resources into that one. But startups, and I'm talking against myself, but I think startups shouldn't worry about it too much. It depends. If you are dealing with personal information, of course, and when I say they shouldn't worry about it, it's not like, yeah, let's just make everything very vulnerable and open to anybody. But it's like you should find how to make money first and how to make the company successful, and then invest into security. Don't make it, it depends on the project, but don't make that your top priority, because it doesn't matter. You can worry about how to store customer data. If you don't have any customers, what are you worried about? First find customers, and then worry about security issues, in my opinion. And even though I'm talking against myself, but that's how I think. First, get some success and then invest into security.
I want to switch a gear about controversial opinions. Yes. So in February last year, 2024, you tweeted, quote, "Do not use UUID for primary key."
Yes, that's so triggering to some people.
So that got around 348,000 views. Lots of people retweeted and liked it. Basically, this broke Wales Twitter tag in one. This happened only in one day. When you tweeted that, and you watched the world burn, is that what's the attention to do so, or were you really surprised by the reaction?
No. So the way that happened, I was working on a project on an app where it was using UUIDs for primary keys. I don't remember. So it's actually same thing happened a few months ago again. I don't remember what was the exact issue, but I was having some issues with that app because it used UUIDs, and the main thing which people forget about is I have a few pet peeves with UUIDs. One is if you use any gems which sets up relations in your application, it's going to probably not work from by default. You need to make tweaks. It might support UUID foreign keys, but probably most likely it won't. So at least you need to change the database structure. Let's say you are using active storage. By default, it generates the foreign keys with bigint, not with UUIDs. So unless you explicitly change that, then your integration is not going to work. And there are other gems which create database tables for you and link to your own models. They are not going to work by default. And probably I was facing an issue like this, and that I had no intentions. I was like, oh yeah, this bloody UUIDs got me again. So I just made a tweet, don't use UUIDs for primary keys. Who would have thought it will trigger so many people? And so that's one of my pet peeves. The other one is, which I really don't like, when people say, oh, I don't need authorization because I use UUIDs. And then nobody can figure out, nobody can access somebody else's data because it's not like changing an integer in the URL and then I'm looking at someone else's orders. That's a big fallacy. I found issues during penetration tests with UUIDs because even it was a UUID, but it leaked in an API response, and I was still able to figure out other customers' UUIDs, and I was able to access their data because I had the UUID and they didn't use proper authorization. So you shouldn't use UUIDs for security. That's a big fallacy. And a lot of people use it because they think it's secure. It's not secure at all. It's security by obscurity. Basecamp, I think Basecamp doesn't use UUIDs. But yeah, big companies use it. And that is a use case, of course, like with everything. There is a use case when you need to generate the IDs on the client side. And that's fine, but still make sure you use authorization. And I think this is just like micro services. There are use cases, but not every application needs microservices. And if you are Amazon and you have 100,000 developers, obviously you don't want to work on a monolith because it's impossible. You want to break it up, right? Or so there is a use case, but it's not for everybody. And the problem is everybody thinks like, oh, Facebook does this, so we need to do it. But you are not Facebook. You are nowhere near on the level of Facebook. So maybe you shouldn't use the same technology and the same solutions to your problems than what Facebook does because you don't have the same problems. You might have one day, but you will cross that bridge when you get there. And for the UUID thing, so actually I tweeted the same thing a few months ago again. It was even worse. It got almost 1 million impressions.
About your ID?
Yes. Yes, I was again, same thing happened. I was working on a project, and this time I remember, I was setting up active storage, and I didn't remember that it needs it will generate bigint foreign keys. And I set it up, I tested, it doesn't work. I'm like, oh, what the heck is that? And then I realized, oh shit, it's the UUIDs. And also this application, which I was changing, it had no reason, nothing to gain from using UUID. And that's I'm like, why do you even do that? It doesn't make sense. I think when you choose something, you should have a good reason. If you go down from the Rails way, which is using bigint for primary keys, you should have a reason. It's not like, oh, because I just want, sometimes you can say, I just want to experiment with this thing. But if you are in a team, then you are also making the rest of the team experimenting with the same thing. And you might generate pain down the road. So you should think twice, or you should have a good reason. Like, I want to use UUIDs because I need to generate IDs on the client side. Perfectly valid use case. Fine. But if you don't, then why do you even use them? Just because somebody told you that you should?
Explain to me, as a junior developer or a business owner who doesn't know much about a UUID, what is it exactly a bad idea, and what should we do instead?
Let's start with the second part. What you should do instead, just use bigint. And the problems is, for one, there are performance issues which are kind of getting solved with the latest version of UUIDs, because it's now, I don't know, like the 5th iteration or something. So it's performance. Also, the indexes, you couldn't have the same indexes on UUID fields as you can have on bigint. It's going to be a bit slower storage to store much larger data. For if you don't have a good reason, then for no reason. Also, integer IDs, like if you work on a project and then you deal with customer support, and then you know from your heart that company 127 is that certain company, and then you, as a developer, you just go to the console, I need to find company 127 because that's the one I need to deal with. It's much easier than a bloody long string which you need to find somewhere and copy, or find the company by name, which you might make a typo, or you might misremember the name. So it's much easier to reference them by a number, in my opinion. And also, it doesn't give you the false premise of security, and you will probably pay more attention to authorization with integer IDs than with UUID.
Technical side, is it easy to switch from UUID to bigint?
I don't think so. It's not easy to switch either direction, to be honest. Because of the foreign keys. It's difficult because you have foreign keys, so they are linked to the same type.
But that means for someone already using UUID everywhere, are they doomed?
There is a migration path probably, but then you shouldn't migrate. Just stick to it, but next time choose more wisely. That's my advice. But don't change it. That's also, if you already went down that path, it just doesn't make sense to change it because it's so much work. But if it's a greenfield project, I think you should really think through if you need UUIDs, because you probably don't. And if you need them in the future, then you can still use them as an extra field. It's much easier.
What do you mean extra?
So let's say you are using bigint for primary keys, and then you realize, oh, I need to generate some IDs on the client side. Then you can generate secondary IDs and use UUID as an extra field. So you have two primary keys, basically. One which is represented on the front end, and one which is just in the database. So you still prevent collisions because you generate a UUID on the client, and then you just send it to the server. It's going to be unique. So going from bigint to UUID, which is you are not really migrating, but you are introducing UUIDs as well, it's much easier than if you already went with UUID primary keys to change to bigint primary keys. That's pretty hard, especially with a large database. You need downtime for sure. need to update all the foreign keys and everything. I don't even want to think about all the problems you need to solve with that.
On the same track of controversial, I want to talk about static typing battles. So you are against static typing in Ruby. When you met Matt's last year, I think it was World here in Toronto, you wrote on blog, one of the reasons I love about Ruby is duck typing. And I think Matt, I'll show you that typing rule. Okay. For others, they can see, are you and Matt standing on a sinking ship, or do both of you see something else nobody else sees?
I think this is again the same thing. There are cases when static typing is good, but I think for the average web application, which is not Facebook, for instance, or Amazon, they are not the average. They are the exception. For the average web application, I think you don't need static typing. You can write a pretty massive big application, have tests, use duck typing, and then you have your safety. And you don't need to deal with types, and you don't need to deal with the extra hurdle to have the type declarations. And when you deal with some external APIs, which might return nil or blank for a given value, your application is not going to crash. It's just going to gracefully handle it. So I also talked to him at the EuRuKo, and yeah, he's still like, yeah, we have types in Ruby already. We don't need anything else. We have duck typing, and he's right, I think.
You mentioned before, I think on your blog, you talked about security feature. What's the most expensive, useless security measure?
That's a good question. That's a good question. But there are multiple things which I think are not really adding to actual security. It's all the policies and checkboxes and things like that, because it's like also the SOC 2 and ISO compliance. It's more of like checkboxes, and it doesn't really mean there are a lot of companies who are SOC 2 compliant, but their security is terrible. So I think that's one of the main things. If you do compliance only to get compliant, not because you also want to improve your security posture, then it's not going to really help. And it's just a waste of money and resources. And you can have a company which is not SOC 2 compliant, but they actually pay attention to security, and they are pretty good at it and pretty secure.
How about Rails is security? You said, I believe the developers should try to mitigate credentials rather than blaming the user. Could you elaborate more on that?
Yes. So credential stuffing is when passwords are leaked from a website, and then somebody has a list of usernames and passwords, and then they're like, okay, let's go to this other random website and try if this user has an account there with the same password. And then they just loop through this whole list, and then they find hits, they find misses, but they find some hits as well, because some people reuse passwords. And it's super easy to blame the user. Why do you reuse your passwords, right? But at the same time, why don't you rate limit and prevent something from happening? And why don't you have a strong password policy? And it's super easy these days to verify that the passwords are not in a known breach, because we have a big database of known breach passwords. And I think it's just not a high effort thing to do on the developer side. And instead of blaming all your customers, what if you just do the change on your end, which is not a massive change, and you prevent their accounts to be taken over by malicious users?
Does that mean that developers should put more work and effort on their side instead of blaming their users?
Exactly. And of course, educate your users as well. But still, whatever, if you can make something, you can make one change, and that will affect all your, let's say, 1 million users, then Why not do that? Why require 1 million people to do something differently than they used to? Yes and no. I think so. My problem with passkeys is it's a one-factor thing. And obviously it's kind of two-factor because you need one factor to access your passkeys. But once that's accessed, let's say you're using 1Password and you store your passkeys in 1Password. If somebody gets your 1Password secret key, so they can decrypt your 1Password vault, then they have access to all your passkeys. They have all the keys to the kingdom. And some people also use that for their 2FA code. So it's just one factor. So you just decrease the effort needed to be your accounts to be taken over. So that's one thing. The other thing is convenience. I don't know. I haven't checked it recently. There was a talk on Trailsword about this from a guy who works for 1Password. And probably there are some improvements in the way it's handled between devices, because you are probably in the Apple ecosystem, right? So for you, it's easy. It's everything in iCloud, or whatever it's called, keychain. And when you use your iPhone and your Mac, everything is synced. So you can use the same keypad. But what if I use an Android phone and I have a MacBook? Because Apple is quite closed, I can't use the same keypad on my phone as easily as I would use the password. Or if I use a Linux laptop and an iPhone, it's the same thing. How can I pass the passkeys in between? The obvious choice is, use 1Password, but then you put all your eggs in the same basket, which is 1Password is brilliant. It's really secure. Everything is encrypted and decrypted on the client side. But if you happen to lose your key to your 1Password secret phrase, then you are doomed because you have everything there.
In your case, any person user, what's the best way to do it to be more secure?
Well, I think you should have strong passwords and use 1Password for that. I use 1Password for my password. It's amazing. But I have for 2FA, I use multiple things. One of them is, I will show you. One of them is this little device called a YubiKey. Yes, this is USB-C. They do it in the USB-B as well. But it's a little hardware token. You plug it into your laptop whenever you need your 2FA code. You just touch this and it generates a TOTP token, and it's super easy. So I use this, and I have authenticator apps on my phone as well. So if I lose my laptop and somebody also finds my 1Password secret phrase, so they can open my vault, they are still doomed. They still can't get access to most of my accounts because they also need this one. Exactly. Or they need my phone, which is very unlikely. They can get, of course, somebody can get my laptop and my phone at the same time, but it's it's more unlikely than if I have everything in 1Password. All they need is one thing. Because the best authorization or authentication story is something you know, something you have, and something you are. So if you have something you know is your username and password, something you own is your hardware token or your phone, and something you are is, ideally you can get also this one with a fingerprint. So it only works with your fingerprint. That's the best actually. Because then you also have the third thing, your hardware key only works with your finger.
So if there's an attacker want to attack your house now, I will be struggling to find anything about Greg.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. So even if you have your fingerprints, because you open your phone with your fingerprints or your laptop, that can get leaked. Somebody can just steal it. But then if you need a hardware token to be open with that fingerprint, they also need the hardware token. So you just increase the difficulty to get access to your accounts. But that's a minimum, but I recommend just use a strong password. Don't reuse passwords, use a password manager and some sort of a 2FA. which is not in the password manager, which is on your phone in an authenticator app or YubiKey.
You said security is a mindset, okay, not memorization. I'm sure you have seen this before, that you have seen me develop trying to understand or to memorize the behavior of what they do. What's the mindset shift needs to happen?
You should always think about the perspective of a malicious actor. Like, how could someone exploit whatever you are working on? Like, for instance, I'm maybe I'm kind of overdo this, but every time I see things, I think about, okay, how can this be bypassed? Like, we went to EuRuKo and you can vote. You know, at EuRuKo, they do pitches for next year's edition. And people go on stage, they pitch a city, and yeah, we're going to organize an amazing conference. Please vote for us. And then the attendees can vote. And this year, the voting worked with everybody got a little ruby. And they had jars for the cities, and then you went and dropped your ruby into the jar. And at the end, they counted it. So I immediately started to think about, okay, this system is just bullshit. You can so easily cheat, right? Because you can go there, try to drop your gem. First of all, you can go and just ask the guys, hey, I didn't get a gem. Please, can you give me one? And you already had one. Then you go to another person and say, hey, I didn't get a gem to vote. Can you give me one? You can get more of them. And you can have 5-6 votes. That's one issue with the whole voting system. Second issue, you can just go there and you pretend you drop your gem and you just pick a few out and then you move it to the other one, the other jar. The third one is, are they going to count it? Maybe they are not even counting it. They are just going to measure it, right? Because, they measure one gem and then they figure out which one is the heaviest, has the most, right? But what if I go and buy a heavier something or just drop a coin or something so I affect the weight of the jar, right? So this is what I mean about mindset. You always think about how can you break something? How can you bypass some measures and get a different outcome from the proposed or the ideal outcome someone is looking for?
If we go back in time to the conference, I wasn't there, but you were there, and you want to do this kind of picking which city to choose to go for next one at the conference. What do you recommend them to do?
They should just hook it to the ticketing system, so everybody can just vote only once. Because in the ticketing system, you could already select, I want this transfer. I want to book the transfer bus on this time. So everybody could just go on their phone and pick, I want this city. Super easy. And then you can only vote once. It's much more secure than, but also they are like, we are adults, nobody's going to cheat. And they also said, please don't cheat, please. But there are people who are always thinking about how to cheat the system. And maybe someone cheated, you never know. I don't know, actually. Maybe someone manipulated the results.
Say they rely on the user's honesty. You're not going to do anything bad and do malicious things.
Exactly, but not everybody is an honest person. That's the problem. The more people you get, the more likely you get someone who's dishonest, and they will abuse whatever they can abuse.
That makes sense. Maybe you should learn next time.
I don't know which one is better for everybody or anybody. I think it's different for everybody. I'm at my current state in life and my current age, I would say.
That's part 1 of my conversation with Craig Molnar. In part 2, we dive into how to build Rails applications with security in mind, and his controversial takes on Ruby Central, Ruby Gems, and more. Part 2 drops next week. Subscribe so you didn't miss it. Thanks for watching the Expert Bench. Until next time, take care.